गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुस्साक्षात् परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः. ओम 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 नारायण नारायण नारायण. So this is Sugama today. There was a doubt. The doubt stated that Upanishads were interpreted differently and the purport of the Upanishads were taken differently by different people. Therefore, how can you say that all the Upanishads unanimously teach only one truth, that is Advaita Brahman? That one is in one's real nature Brahman alone. How can you say that, since there are many schools? For this, the Purvapakshi has referred a few schools, several schools. All that Siddhanti replied, all these schools, point by point, are going to be refuted in the various adhikaranas in future, in Brahma Sutra Bhashya. Now in the last point, as a last point, he says here one good point. I'll just read out here after 7. So, yetu adhunatana. So, different schools have been replied. Now, adhunatana, the modern schools, the different schools in our previous history, Karmavadi and all those have been Sankhya, Yoga, Vaisheshika, Bauddha, Jaina, all those things will be discussed. All those things have been replied. Now, yetu adhunatana dvaita vedantinah. Okay. Now there are modern Dvaitins. Adhunatana Dvaitin is not a one particular school. All other than Advaitins are Dvaitins alone. We take it in this sense, not any particular school. We don't mean any particular school. Anybody other than Advaitin, all are Dvaitins only. So the many schools of Dvaita. So, yetu adhunatana dvaita vedantinah. Now, in the modern period, in the modern society, we find certain dvaita vedantins. Their view is like this: aham pratyayagamyam atmavada, aham pratyayagamya atmavada. In these things, they say Atma is always known through I notion. The modern Dvaitins, they accept like that Atma is always necessarily known through I notion. That means Atma can never be free from I notion. See, this is the modern Dvaitins. Why we call modern Dvaitins? Because the ancient Dvaitins like Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Bauddha, they did not mean, they did not say that Aham Pratyaya, the I notion, is necessarily present in Atman. It is present due to Ajnana. But Atma in its real nature is free from I notion. In Moksha Kala, Atma becomes free from I notion. You take whether Nyaya Vaisheshika. Nyaya Vaisheshika say I notion is not a necessary part of Atma, is a necessary quality or necessary nature of Atma. Is not essential nature of Atma. Due in the Ajnana Kala, we find I notion, we find this reference of I to the Atma is only during Ajnana. But in Moksha Kala, Atma becomes free from I notion. Nyaya Vaisheshikas say Atma becomes free from I notion. Sankhyas yogis say Atma becomes Sakshi without I notion. So, I notion is present only in Samsara Kala. And then Bauddhas also say Atma becomes free from I notion in the Nirvana. Like this, the ancient Dvaitins, all of them don't admit that. But it is the modern Dvaitins alone. Modern means a few centuries before, a few centuries ago. Few centuries, maybe 1,000 years. Okay. So these in the recent Dvaitins means all other post-Shankarites. After Shankaracharya, certain Dvaita schools that have arisen in the other than Nyaya Vaisheshika, the Dvaita schools and dualist schools that existed during Shankaracharya's time were Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, like this. So they all, one good feature about them is that in samsara kala, Atma is associated with I notion. But in moksha kala, Atma becomes free from I notion. So that's very interesting. But the modern Dvaitins, post-Shankarite Dvaitins, certain new, that's why he calls modern in the sense you don't find them in ancient days. They developed somehow, I don't know how it developed, they developed later stage. Now what they say, adhunatana dvaita vedantinaha aham pratyaya gamya atmavada. Atma, they have a theory of Atma. They have a doctrine of Atma which is always known through I notion. Which is known through I notion. Atma is always known through I notion. It is never free from I notion. Even in deep sleep, I notion is present. They say, in waking state, I notion is present. You take, for example, Dvaita, Vishishta Dvaita, and then Ramanujan, Nimbarka, Vallabha, and so on. So, in waking state and dream state, Atma is always known through I notion. Even in deep sleep, Atma has, the I notion continues to exist with Atma. Even in deep sleep, Atma is not free from I notion. See how peculiar ideas they have. Atma is not free from I notion. In moksha kala, where it goes to Vaikuntha and whatever loka they say, there also Atma remains with I notion. That means I notion is an essential nature of Atma. Atma can never become free from I notion. This idea belongs to post-Shankarite Dvaita schools alone. The ancient schools like Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Bauddha, Jaina, they didn't think like that. See, it's a very strange thing. Swamiji has observed. It is only modern Dvaita school alone started holding this view that I notion is a necessary, essential nature of Atma. Atma can never become free from I notion. Atma can never become free from I notion. Always aham pratyaya gamya. This is strange, you see. So vade tatastha ishvaravadaha jagat satyatvavada brahmatma shesha sheshivada mukti taratamya vadadi pankilam tatastha ishvaravada. Next is meaning of the Vedanta such as the doctrine of Atman as known through I notion. Second is doctrine of God being only an efficient cause and not a material cause. Tatastha Ishvara Vada means, they say, regarding Ishvara also, they have got a very peculiar school like this. They say that Atma is a purely efficient cause, Paramatma, the cause of the world, is only an efficient cause and not at all material cause. That means Paramatma is one and his material cause is something different from him. He himself is not the material cause of the world. That means Paramatma stays. He is only a maker of the world, not the material of the world. But Vedanta says Atma is both the maker as well as the material. He himself is both. He himself is both. That means he is all-pervasive, he is immanent, he is immanent in the world and also transcendent. He himself appears as the world. So this was the schools were holding in those days. But now, Tatastha Ishvaravada. Ishvara is Tatastha. Tatastha in the sense only efficient cause, no material cause. Tatastha Ishvaravada, Jagat Satyatvavada. Then the Jagat is real. See, Jagat is real two ways again. Now in the Vyavaharika Drishti, that means when we are in Ajnana, as a Jiva, as a Samsari, the world is real, which everybody experiences. Nobody has any doubt about it. But what they say is, even in moksha kala, Jagat is real. In ancient Dvaitins, in bandhana kala, Jagat is real, but in moksha kala, Jagat goes away. In bandhana kala, during the bondage alone, world is real, but in moksha kala, world doesn't exist. So, but the modern Dvaitins say world is eternal, really existing, whether in the bondage or whether we are in moksha. That means world exists as an eternal reality, whether in bondage or whether in moksha. All the time it is there. It is there alone. Okay? This is the problem. So, Jagat Satyatva. Jagat Satyatvam is not conditional for them. For Advaitins, Jagat, reality of the world, never exists. World never exists as a real. It is only an appearance. But for some people in those days, other than Shankara's school, world is a real during ignorance. But once you gain knowledge and attain moksha, the reality of the world goes away. That means for them, the reality of the world was conditional. In a condition alone, world is real, not absolutely real. But these Dvaita schools, which came after the period of Shankara, for them world is real, not only in bondage, even in moksha. It is not a conditional reality, it is eternal, unconditional reality. World is an unconditional reality. This is a very strange schools that have developed. Reality of the world is unconditional for them. But in Shankara's time too, Shankara's school says world is never real. It appears, that's all. In reality, it's never reality. In fact, it is never real. But there were other schools. There were schools other than Shankaracharya's. They held like that the world is real tentatively. World is real in a condition. When you transcend the condition, world doesn't exist. So the reality of the world was conditional for them, and it is a totally unreal for Advaitins. But for these Dvaitins, it is unconditionally real. Strange people. Okay, so aham pratyaya gamya atmavada one. Tatastha Ishwaravada. Ishwara is efficient cause alone. Jagat Satyatvavada. Brahmatma Shesha Sheshivada. And then the Paramatma and Jiva. How they are related to each other. So, Jiva is a part of Ishvara. Shesha Sheshi. Shesha Sheshi. Paramatma is a whole. Jiva is a part of it. This school also we did not find during Shankaracharya's time or even before Shankara's time. Because such a school was never referred anywhere in the Upanishads, in Bhagavad Gita, in Puranas, nowhere. Even the Sankhyas, Vaisheshikas, even the Bauddhas. Before Shankara, Buddhism lived for around 1,000 years. Okay, if you go by the modern the calculation of history, modern dating of history, Buddha lived in 5th century BC, Shankaracharya in 8th century. That means 5 plus 8, 5 plus 7, around 1100 to 1200 years. So, such a long time in Buddhistic literature, whenever they called Vedanta, they refer to Advaita alone. Even Jainas, when they referred, before Shankara's period, whenever they referred Vedanta, they referred to Advaita alone. Even in Buddhist days or Jaina days, even BC, much before in the 5th century BC, even later also until the Shankaras, even until the post-Shankaras period, always people thought Vedanta means only Advaitin or Advaitin or Dvaita was there. That we can say Dvaita. That means Bandhana Kala there is Dvaita, but in Moksha Kala there is Advaita alone. See, that's a very interesting thing. Now that there is a Vishishtadvaita, that Atma is a part of Ishvara, or a limb of Ishvara, or a quality of Ishvara. Ishvara is qualified, Jiva Jagat are qualities of Ishvara, limbs of Ishvara. This kind of a Vishishtadvaita, Shesha Sheshi Bhava, never existed, because nobody referred, neither the Upanishads, nor Purana, nor Gita, nor any other ancient Vedantic text, nowhere you find that. Therefore, Shankara also didn't refer this kind of Dvaitins, this kind of Vishishtadvaitins. And Bauddha Jainas also, whenever they refer to Vedanta, they only called Advaitins alone. There was no reference to Dvaitins of these modern Dvaitins, and no reference to Vishishtadvaitins ever in all the 1200 years, more than 1000 years of our ancient history, pre-Shankara's history, you never find. Even post-Shankara also, 11th or 12th century alone, Shankaras you find, 10th or 11th. And then 12th century Madhvas. That means this kind of schools of Dvaita and Vishishtadvaita never existed. Therefore, Shesha Sheshi Bhava, these are all modern Dvaitins. That's why Swamiji calls them modern Dvaitins. Okay? Brahmatma Shesha Sheshi Vada, then Mukti Taratamya Vada, another point. In Muktau, there is a Taratamya. There is a gradation in Mukti. In fact, in Shankara's time, the nature of moksha is one. Same nature for all. Whoever attains liberation, all the people who have attained liberation, the nature of liberation is same for all. But it is in this post-Shankarite Dvaitins or Vishishtadvaitins and such other schools, it is these people who started accepting in moksha also there is gradation. That means there is a differences. So moksha is not the same. So those who have attained the moksha, Vaikuntha or some such lokas, there people are of different levels, different Aishwarya, different Sampada. Even in their happiness also there is a difference. The degree of happiness differs from one liberated person to another liberation. That means, how can you say a liberated person having a lesser happiness compared to another liberated person? How can you call that liberated person who has a lesser happiness, lesser ananda as liberated? Does he not feel that I am bound and I want more happiness? So does he not feel? It's a very strange argument. Even for a common sense logic, it looks wrong. It looks unacceptable. See, if there is a lack, if there is any deficiency in your ananda, in your happiness, naturally you would look for higher happiness, greater happiness. So the present condition looks like a bondage for you. It looks like a no liberation. But they say, even if you have a lesser happiness compared to others, still it is a liberation. That means in the liberated state, there is a higher person, lower person, higher happiness and greater happiness and lesser happiness. Even that they call it liberation. So Muktau Taratamyavadaha. There is a variation, different levels, different degrees of happiness, different degrees of freedom, and they call it as a freedom. If there are lower degree of freedom, how can you call it a freedom? Because there is a bondage. There will be a desire to get liberated even from the lower level. Even after attaining the so-called moksha, still the desire to become free is not gone. Then how can you call it a freedom? A freedom is a freedom. After getting it, you really feel free and you don't want to become something more. If you have something more, then the present state which you have achieved, the state which you have achieved is incomplete. You want to get rid of it. It is a bondage. Then you can't call it freedom. You can't call it liberation. But they say it is a liberation. It's a liberation, they say. It's a very strange argument. So this kind of arguments came only after Shankara's period. Therefore, Brahmatma Shesha Sheshitvavada, Muktau Taratamyavada, Adi Pankilam, etc., etc. Swamiji referred some of the characters of post-Shankarite Vedantins. The Vedantins, the character, the nature of Atma, nature of Ishvara, nature of moksha, okay, the nature of the world. Nature of the world, nature of moksha, nature of Ishvara, and nature of Jiva. In these four ideas, there are different schools. They are holding different views, all these views, and still they say it is a mukta and it is a final knowledge, it is an absolute knowledge, where there is a lot of divisions, a lot of confusions. So this is a very difficult to, this is very difficult to accept. Therefore, okay, a doctrine that there is a variation or a gradation in the nature of liberation and so on. So, picking up the arguments, ayyo, this is a pankilam. Pankila means they have got all kind of a, how to say, pankila means slush, the mud, muddy, in the rainy season on the mud roads, not mud roads. Nowadays you have tar road alone, nobody can see the pankila. But in those days you use only muddy roads alone. Therefore in rainy season, due to the rain, it becomes only slushy. Okay. And unclean. Slushy means, pankila means unclean philosophies, unclean doctrines. Unclean and false doctrines. Therefore, these are all pankila. Vadadi pankilam, siddhanta abhasam. These are all false siddhanta. Abhasa means these are unclean and false siddhantas because logically they are wrong. And the human mind also, if you go by the desire of the human mind, I want to become free. A person who wants to become free, how can he be called liberated? By attaining something which is less than desired. When you attain something less than desired, how can you call that what is less than you, what is desirable? How can you call that a freedom and a liberation? They call it liberation. So this kind of a strange interpretations, Swamiji says them, they are all unclean and also false doctrines. Vedantartatvena kalpayantaha, they present these schools as the Vedanta derived from Upanishads. They are strangely imposing their views in the non-existing Upanishadic statements. Upanishadic statements don't lend to be interpreted in this manner. Upanishads don't lend to be interpreted in this manner. It looks very, very artificial commentary. Artificial means there is one thing and you keep on imposing something else. For example, in the Vaishvanara, in the waking state, dream state, deep sleep state, take Mandukya Upanishad, where the waking state, dream state, deep sleep state is discussed and analyzed. They try to interpret what is waking state. Waking state is waking state is Pradyumna, Aniruddha, Sankarshana, like these three states. Vasudeva is Turiya. These are all two artificial interpretations. Then that way you can interpret what is waking state, dream state, deep sleep state. Waking state is Indira, waking state is Rahul Gandhi, and then dream state is Rajiv Gandhi, and then what you call deep sleep state is I don't know, like what is that, Indira Gandhi, and Turiya is Nehru. So this kind of is no meaning at all. There is no connection. There is no Abba, see the big loudspeaker is coming. Just wait. Is a market. He is selling clothes. See what a big loudspeaker. My God. A street vendor who comes with a van and how loudly he shouts with a loudspeaker, announces. So, see, this is a strange Siddhanta, strange schools, kalpayantaha, by imagining. That means the Upanishads don't lend this kind of interpretation. The ancient schools were closer to Upanishads. They were not clear, but they were closer to the meaning. They were not perfectly clear, but they were just closer. By some correction, we could make their doctrine true to Upanishads. But these post-Shankarites, Dvaitins means many kind of Dvaitins. Their interpretation is too much of imposition. Wherever Brahma comes, it is only Krishna or it is only Rama, can't be anybody else. So but there is no word of Krishna or Rama as Parabrahma, nowhere it is stated. So it looks very artificial interpretations of these post-Shankarites regarding Upanishads. It's a very strange thing. Therefore he says, iti siddhanta abhasam pankilam. Unclean and false doctrines they have developed, they have imposed. Developed means they have imposed on Vedanta and saying that this is the real school, this is the meaning implied in the Vedanta, in the Upanishads. Okay, by doing like this, prachina dvaiti yukti prachardikavashtambaha Vedanta vakyanya anyatha nayanto nayantaha prachina dvaiti yukti prachardikavashtambaha. So these people are only, Swamiji is using little harsh expressions. Picking up the arguments vomited by the ancient dualist, prachardita, vomited, by Prachina Dvaitins. Prachina Dvaitins, which they have rejected as wrong views, like Nyaya Vaisheshikas, by analyzing well, they have rejected them as useless arguments. These people have picked them up and then started building up their own philosophy and claiming that it is based upon Upanishads. So that is a very strange thing. So Prachina Dvaitins have vomited them. Certain arguments vomited by the ancient dualists, they are trying to interpret the Vedantic text in a far-fetched way to suit their thinking, and have forged new texts also. Two things they have done. They have interpreted, deviated so much from the mantras that any common man, you look at the mantras, it looks that his interpretation is far-fetched and imposed on the mantras. Mantras don't lend themselves to be interpreted this way. Such meaning won't come at all in any way, however you deeply look at them. So they imposed the new meanings even if it doesn't fit into the mantras. This is one way. Not only that, and then they found that if Upanishads don't permit, they jumped into Puranas. They tried to interpret Upanishads in the light of Puranic statements. But the Puranic statements were talking more of a what you call Sagunopasana, and also so they were talking in a different context. And those Puranic statements, they have used them to interpret Upanishads. Second thing is they have forged the new texts. This is also a very strange thing. You have to accept the Upanishads and give the meaning to them. They have forged the new Puranic shlokas, new granthas, and in the light of those books, they try to interpret Upanishads. The Upanishads look very far-fetched. Their interpretation looks very, very unconnected and very, very taking too much of freedom and stretching the words to any extent and taking the meaning whichever they like, which suits them, any meaning that suits them. So this kind of extremely stretching the meaning of the word, it's not right. Nobody can explain it. If you start explaining like that, then any book means anything. Any book can be interpreted to mean anything else. So it looks very odd. Okay. Therefore, nayantaha Vedanta vakyani anyatha nayantaha. So thus they thinking and have forged new texts. Thus they nayantaha avidyamana vakyanya picha kalpayantaha. They have forged the new statements, Gaudapada's Karika. They have taken the Agama Prakarana Gaudapada's Karika as an Upanishad. Mandukya Upanishad. And they have forged new Pauranic shlokas and claiming them that this is the real Veda Vyasas. So they have false forged shlokas. They themselves have written and interpreted, imposed in them, inserted into the Puranas, and in the light of those Vakyas, they interpret the whole Upanishads, which is totally unconnected to the mantras. So because of these things, kadarthayanti, vakyanyapya kalpayantaha kadarthayanti vishuddhadvaita siddhanta gangam. They are polluting purely Advaitic Ganga. Try in vain to spoil the sacredness of sacredness. They try to spoil the sacredness of Advaita Ganga. Shankara Swamiji compares Advaita school with Ganga which is ever pure. They try to pollute the pure Vedanta of Advaita by this kind of false interpretations. So, Vedanta Vakyani Anyatha Nayantaha Avidyamana Vakyanyapya Kalpayantaha Kadarthayanti. Kadarthayanti means they despise. Kadarthayanti Vishuddhadvaita Gangam and pollute it. They despise it and pollute it. So, Vivida Akshepa Prakshepenavali Prakshepenavalayitu mihante. They try to spoil the purity by doing prakshepa, akshepa prakshepa, by Vivida various objections and also various interpolations. You interpolate into them. By attributing, by various accusations and misrepresentations. By various accusations and misrepresentations, they're trying to spoil it. Vishuddhadvaita siddhanta gangam vivida akshepa prakshepena avalayutami hantecha te vyartha prayasaha. So they fail. They try, yet they fail. By attributing false, they deserve to be ignored. Then what is to be done? Should we reply to them? There is nothing to reply because they are all just so outrightly, visibly false. You can see them, the manipulations. So I don't have to reply because there is no deeper philosophy which needs to be discussed. There is nothing deeper in it. It's all superficial manipulation. So the vyartha prayasa, they do in vain. Vyartha prayasa means their effort goes waste. Because when you manipulate the truth doesn't lend itself. The sentences don't lend in themselves to be interpreted like that. Then the people start rejecting their interpretation. They get angry further. See how people are rejecting our Siddhanta and only accepting Advaita. They feel bad. That's because the reason is there are defects in their own schools. Vyartha prayasa. Bhashyodita vidya viveka prakriya anabhignatvateva upekshani. Because the basic defect is they don't know which Shankaracharya's tradition, which is coming from time immemorial, the concept of avidya and vidya. The idea of vidya and avidya is not clear in their schools. They have totally misrepresented. Tadevam vadi vipratipatte tavan nastikopiatankaha atmaikatva vadi atmaikatva vidya pratignyaya. Therefore, atma ekatva, when we say that Upanishads teach atma ekatva, we are not away from the truth, and it remains irrefutable. Okay. Vadi vipratipattes tavan nasti. There is no vipratipatti, there is no difference of opinion in this fact, because Advaitins take very balanced view, don't go to extreme to anything. Okay. Yadyapi kechit, next paragraph. Yadyapi kechit Vedanta sagunopasana para kechit abrahmabhuta pranadyapaste. I think he's talking differently. Saguna and pranopasana, something is there. Regarding that, we shall tell in the next class. Okay. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om Tat.